Hello and welcome to the Dentrepreneur Show. Hello, this is Dr. D. Todd Russell. Welcome to Dentrepreneur. This is episode 1 of my podcast. And with me today is a close friend of mine and quite frankly, probably the best dental expert in the field of practice transitions, the founder and CEO of Transition One, Chris Vandiford. Chris, welcome.
Good to be with you, Todd. Thanks for the intro.
Oh, sure. Chris, go ahead and, I've obviously tried to, pick you up and put you on a pedestal there. And quite frankly, the years that we've known each other, I've always admired the way you run your company and how clean and sharp everything are. But go ahead and tell my audience who you are. Give us a little bit more of a background, maybe where you started and how you got here. Because I know you've been doing this for, a minute or two now.
A few minutes. I think I'm the same age I told you the other day as some of those old people in the business. And I'm starting to sell practices, Todd, of young people I put in 20 years ago. So it's very fulfilling. But I've been doing this 24 years from the South, from Atlanta, migrated up to Ohio. I always ask people, how did you get to Ohio? Good stories. But I cover several states, even states out west, but it's really a networking business, and you end up working with clients who become friends like yourself. And it's very fulfilling now. So I have a good team. We're about 6 deep, and we're kind of concierge and niche. You call us if you need us to broker your business, buy, sell, partner. If you need financing, if you want me to review contracts, if you want me to help you with associates, it's all of those intangibles, but we look forward to working with good people.
One of the other things I've noticed about you, Chris, is there's been some instances where somebody you knew, a doc you knew, you sold the practice to them, or you helped them with an associate contract and then they decide to list with another broker. And all of a sudden that other broker is stuck and that broker is calling you. That's a big accolade, right? When people are calling you to kind of rescue everybody and you step in. I know that just happened in the last week or so. And I think that certainly makes you unique. My experience with guys, gals in your industry is, and like most industries, they're not all cut from the same cloth. And so anyhow, it's great that you get to be the guy called in to rescue.
I rescue a lot. I bring the 5-gallon bucket of water in and put out a lot of fires. But it's humbly, I say, I've been doing this so long, I've seen what failure looks like. I've learned. Yeah. But I've also seen success. So now I know how to navigate clients, friends, fellow brokers, banks, CPAs, and attorneys down that path.
Yeah. Well, this is really just an introduction, Chris, to you and to my podcast. So the rest of our show today is going to really center around exiting, right? I mean, that's what you buy and you sell, right? You help, you mitigate the buying and the selling. I really feel that Dentrepreneur, and my goal here is to talk to my colleagues about their exit strategies. I'm talking to people who are, let's say you're 35 years old. You just bought a practice from Chris Vandiford. You now need to start planning on how you're going to exit. And that doesn't just mean saving money in your 401k. We're talking about building the systems and the cultures and knowing who is going to buy your practice, or at least have the strategy built to be able to sway one way or the other every couple of years. You're planning and preparing. So the big question, if you were a dentist or even a small business owner, at what point in your career would you, Chris Vandiford, start thinking about an exit? I already told you my plan, but
this is exciting because we can talk about it from a seller point of view. We can talk about it from a buyer point of view.
That's why you're on.
In 30 seconds, we want to introduce our young dentists and buyers to a practice that allows them to get out of dentistry in 10 years. That has all the metrics, the patience, the space, the ability to pull that trigger if they have to. From a seller's point of view, I love it. Most sellers I sit down with say, Chris, I have 3 to 5 more years. And I smile. I hear that all the time. 5 more years. I'll call you in 5 more years. Actually, if any dentist says to me, I'm considering a 3 to 5 year window, I tell them, Doc, it's time. It's time to plan. You need to know what you're worth. We need to discuss what affects your value over the next short or long periods of time. And we need to understand how to maximize that value. And the longer you support in that 3 to 5 years, the stronger that value and the more successful the transition. You and I have talked about this many times.
Yep. And this will be a little bit of a theme through the Dentrepreneur podcast is, and maybe I don't know if I'm going to necessarily reach the audience. I hope I do. And if this is someone listening to this podcast and you know of somebody that I'm talking about who doesn't listen to these kind of things, and, not to be age discriminatory, but let's say you're a 65-year-old dentist and, over the next 5 years, you don't want to work 5 days a week. You want to work 3 days a week and then 2 days a week. And
Yes.
And I've referred you those doctors. I've gone and looked at those practices for my own dental partnership group. And doc, it's only 2 days a week. Its value is what it's doing today. Right. And many of them think, well, I used to do $1 million.
Right.
Why can't I get $1 million for it? Well, and time and time again, you and I have seen this. You walk in and the place smells like 1964. Right.
The orange carpet. Yeah. Yeah. I think last year we retired a dentist who was 82, and he said, Chris, I can confirm I'm 12 years overdue. He says, I waited 12 years. He said, my wife even told me when I was 70 to get out, and I didn't listen to her. So there is a right time. I call it like a boxer, a prize fighter. When you have that world champion on top of the world, he's won 4 or 5 fights in a row. Boy, you want to execute your strategy when you're on top. What I see, and Todd, I believe what you've seen, is you'll see this gradual decline, and then it reaches a point of emergency. And when you get that call, perception is reality to the buyer's point of view. We have a practice that's not as healthy, therefore more risky, therefore I have to offer less. And you and I go through that constantly.
Yeah. In fact, again, topic for another discussion possibly, but I'll touch on it a little bit. This concept in my head of at 35 starting to plan for your exit, because it takes you so many years out of dental school or professional school to kind of ramp yourself up and gain some experience, and now you're sort of you're the go-to. But when you all of a sudden have tragedy and you're 50 years old, disability insurance doesn't cover it.
No.
And so if you're planning early in your career for your exit, you have that logarithm in front of you. And when those forks in the road come, some of them can lead to the same location, but you have to have that forethought. You have to have surrounded yourself with some experts to help you to plan that. Ultimately, it's all up here in your head as to where the plan's going to go. But you need to have that plan to prepare for exactly like you said, that tragic moment that we see time and time again.
I had this young man from a small town in Ohio, grew up poor, very humble guy. But that was probably the best attribute about him, because when I showed him a practice that had 3,500 active patients, it was in a 1-story building with siding that was peeling off. And when you walked in, it had carpet with 30 years of blood and spit on it, and it had that 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
But he was smart enough to know that it had more patients than he could support himself. And with a little money and sweat equity, he could pull up the carpet, put in hardwood floors, and paint it. And here's what happened. 3,500 active patients. Within 2 years, he hired an associate because there were enough patients to support. 5 years later, he's rounding first base in the second. He played softball in the summers, slid in the second, broke his back. He's a dentist.
Yep.
He's a weak back. There was a clause in his contract that said if there's any disability occurs, the trigger would pull for his associate to buy the practice. Guess what? Imagine if he had bought a practice that only had a few hundred patients and 3 ops, and he's rounding second base. He's done.
And that's what we're talking about, is that strategic planning for someday, the exit strategy. All right, Chris. Well, thank you very much for this short introduction. I really appreciate you being on today. There's much more to come here. And, that last little segment there, I want it to be a nice teaser for the future. Chris, how can people find you?
You can reach me on my website, transition1.net. You can email me at chris@transition1.net, or you can call my cell, 937-206-2913. I'll answer.
Awesome. All right, Mr. Vandiford, it is always a pleasure to see you and talk with you. I appreciate you being on the show.
Next time.
You're going to be back soon. Thanks, buddy.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. Please follow or subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. If you would like further information or to meet with me one-on-one and discuss your practice, please feel free to contact me through my website, dentrpreneurllc.com. Many more exciting guests and topics are headed your way.